And just checking that we are live now. And we are. Welcome everyone to another live edition of Real Talk produced by Let's Talk America with host Shana Thornton podcast. Of course, I'm Shana Thornton and I am super, super excited that you have joined us tonight. And it is Sunday. It is September the 29th. And it's 8 o'clock or shortly after 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Hour. And I am so, so super duper excited and elated to have my guest be on with me tonight. She's a personal friend, but someone who is so committed to the advocacy of aging in so many different ways. And tonight, I hope you also become more educated, inspired, and motivated by this important topic. And I am certainly always interested in learning as much as I can. And sitting with Sadika Gibson, the one and only Sadika Gibson, previously taught me so much and opened my eyes to so much that's going on out there. Tonight, we are talking about aging smart. Aging smart. We have to get old, as my grandmother say. You have to, right? The alternative, as we know, is death, and for some, it can be untimely. So we have to age. But how do we do that with grace? How do we do that wisely? We're going to talk about the aspect of emotional wisdom that comes with it, right? And we're going to also talk about the physical part. I think so many times, Sadika, we talk about the physical ailments. I think anybody over 35 can feel it, that you don't quite feel the same getting up in the morning as you did 10 years prior. But we're also tonight, we're going to talk about self-care. But before we get started with the questions, and we want everyone to put their questions in, we see Shauna out of Atlanta Metro. Hello, Shauna. Thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate you. We're going to ask that you get your questions and your comments in. We're talking about aging smart. That's right, everybody. If you're 28, one day, hopefully, God, of course, you want to be 35. Or if you're 35, you want to be 45 one day. So this conversation is important to all of us. Don't just assume it's for the people that's hitting 50, right? Us Xers are certainly pushing on 50. Some are already 50 plus. But this conversation is for everyone. Get those questions and comments in. But right now I have the one and only Sadika Gibson on with us. And she's an advocate for aging and aging wisely, I'm going to say, Sadika, because I know you think we can age in style, right? Mm-hmm. The days of aging as our great grandparents at the hit of the century of 1900, those days are over. You're saying we can be stylish and awesome and phenomenal all in one and feel good inside and out. And that's the kind of conversation we want to have here tonight on Let's Talk America podcast. So Sadika, I've seen your CV and resume. I know it's super duper impressive. I happen to know that. But I want the world right now. We have some individuals that will watch us from Africa on right now, from India. We have Atlanta Metro on, Colombia as well. Please tell them in 2 minutes or less, what got you to be committed to such an important topic of aging that inevitably we all will face? Or again, we know the alternative. Take it away, lady.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. And you have so much energy. I'm going to try to match your energy with mine, okay? But yeah, I'm so happy to be here to talk about a very, very important subject.
Yes.
Because as we all know, we are living longer, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
Every year, we've got 15,000 people who are turning 65 and aging into Medicare. So that means that we're living longer, but what we want to have a longer quality of life. We want to be able to live our best life. We want to have it going on for as long as we can.
That's right.
And I tell you, my inspiration for my organization, Best Life Golden Years. And of course, we support our senior citizens and our veterans. My inspiration for the organization is my grandmother, Mrs. Annie King Sullivan, and she lived to be almost 100. We were preparing her 100th birthday celebration, and she passed away, but I think she was ready. God called her, and she went on to be with him. So at any rate, the time that I spent with her, she devoted herself to helping older people and helping the community. She was a caregiver, and my sisters, brothers, my mother, and I, we all supported her in caring for her parents. So actually, she is my inspiration. During COVID in 2020, there was a lot of awareness of adult and the older adults and the loneliness and the food insecurity. And that's when I started my organization. And one of the things that we started out doing and we continue today is our annual Thanksgiving meal deliveries. And so we do deliver a hot Thanksgiving meal to our seniors as well as our veterans and caregivers. We support our caregivers. We have an annual caregiver reception where we honor and support those who are caring for family, loved ones, friends, or even if they work as a caregiver. We have we do it weekly, what we call a caregiver cafe. And so it's not just for caregivers, it's for anyone who wants to be inspired. So they come in on a Zoom, they come in virtually, and we do breathing exercises and motivation. We discuss various resources that are available. We talk about various issues and topics that are pertaining to caregivers, but also anyone can benefit from the topics. So, and then also we do placement. There are people who reach out to us and say, hey, it's that time. I think I need to consider assisted living for my parent. Can you help me with that? And we help with that as well. So, and there are many other things we could go on, but I'll stop right there because I know we've got a lot to unpack during our time together.
Yeah, I love that. See, everyone you can see right now, if you're hearing our voice and you're watching us on live or the replay, we have the one and only Sadika Gibson on with us. She's an advocate for aging, and I love it because it's more than the physical ailments that does matter. Okay, she's going to touch on some of the connections we have with vascular disease and dementia, that new information coming out later in the conversation. But certainly, she's talked about the emotional part of it as well, and what happens with the body and how you interact with the world past a certain age. These are conversations or chats or details that many people feel uncomfortable about, it can wiggle about, but it happens. And we've got to have those conversations to be the best we can be. We had Dr. Lori Johnson on a few weeks ago talking about menopause and premenopause and things that happen to the woman and also men as they age, right? And so we also want to make sure, what do we do with the information that we have? And we're all about solutions here on Let's Talk America podcast. Of course, I'm Shana Thornton, your on-air host and executive producer, and it's time to take it away with questions and comments coming in for our one and only guest, Sadika Gibson. We do want to, of course, thank you, Kay, for watching us out of Atlanta Metro. Appreciate you, and we love your support. Stacy out of Atlanta Metro, thank you. She said, good evening, Sadika. And Brandy Pinckney Green, who is a medical provider herself out of Atlanta Metro, said, good evening, ladies. And Lakeisha Bynum, an educator out of Atlanta Metro. Thank you, Lakeisha, for joining us tonight. We ask that everyone, thank you for the hellos. We want to hear your questions, want to hear your concerns as we age, right? If there are questions you want to talk about, I'm going to kick it off with something so important that Sadika is so passionate about. And I want to talk about the S word, Sadika, not Shannon for Sadika, but for self-care, right? I mean, so many of us are parents, right? Or we're aunts and uncles and godparents or grandparents. And so many of us talk about hygiene to our young people, if it's our nieces or nephews. But when it comes to self-care as we age, let's talk about aging over 40, the big 40, right? How does that look in terms of self-care? Because I think for so many people, we think, well, take care of yourself. Go get your nails done, get your hair done. But I know you're saying those are some of the basic things that people opt to do. But you think self-care actually involves a lot more. Help us out. How so?
Yeah, Shana, that's a great question. And you're right. I often hear women say, oh, I'm going to the nail salon. I'm going to get my hair. This is my self-care day. And, all of that is great because as women, yeah, we want to look fabulous all of the time. And so certainly we want to do that. But when we talk about self-care, I like to go a little deeper. For example, self-care is getting that annual mammogram that you need to do. Self-care is going to have your annual physical exam. For our men, self-care is having that prostate examination.
That's right.
Yes, self-care is having that colonoscopy. That's not as scary as some people may think. Yeah, you need to drink all of the fluids and everything, but once you get past that, you'll be okay. It's better to be safe Safer
That's right.
than sorry, right? So self-care is doing all of those things. And self-care is actually ensuring that you have the best quality of life that you can have. And how do we do that? We ensure that we're taking care of ourselves, mind, body, and soul.
Right.
And I know so often people hate to hear, okay, eating properly. Yes, what you put in your body is very important. The best thing to do when you go into the grocery store is to shop the perimeter. Because as you know, the perimeter is where the dairy is, where the fruits and
Yes.
vegetables, the proteins. So try to avoid going through the aisles. Let's start off with the perimeter of the grocery store.
Yes.
Yeah. And then also even the physical. There's so many so much technology that's out there, so many apps that you can use. You can set timers if you're working from home, so you're in front of the computer. Set the timer on your phone to get up every hour and a half and stretch and walk around.
Yes.
Start in like small bites and small chunks, and
That's
then
right.
graduate to the bigger things if you're just starting off. Take a moment to do those deep breathing exercises. You'll be surprised how good it really makes you feel.
That's
And
right.
then you talk about being in your 40s and 50s. Most of the senior centers, and I know some of us hate to use that word, just accept it or think of another word in your head. But
That's right.
oftentimes you can join your neighborhood centers, and that's your taxes are paying for it. So the
Yeah.
price that you pay, the fee is very minimal. And you can go in there and get on the exercise machines. You can participate in a yoga class.
Right.
So there's a lot that you can do that's affordable. And I encourage people to do that and get a partner. Get an accountability partner. We all have girlfriends and people that we talk to and encourage. Let's encourage each other.
Yeah, I love that. And
Yeah.
that's so key. I want to, when you talked about self care, I appreciate you saying self care is also allowing us to be here in another decade, right? And that is
Hmm.
prevention. A lot of people, and we're going to touch on that in a bit when it comes to heart disease. And I know we have a provider on, and feel free to chime in with us, Miss Green, when we hear heart disease and blood pressure and things that, right, so many Americans, millions of Americans deal with. I saw something now, it's close to over 80 million Americans are considered obese. People become less moved by it, right? Well, you're saying I got dyslipidemia, cholesterol. It is what it is. I've got kidney disease. I've got blood pressure. But when we hear the C word of cancer, obviously there's a different emotion that goes through us for obvious reasons, right? And that reasoning has so much to do with the fact of we've all heard the stories where you were here today and then 2 or 3 weeks later you're gone. And I appreciate if we're gonna be moved and obviously be afraid of the C word of cancer as we should be, obviously to some degree, but obviously we have faith. And if we're, taking full advantage of the medical system, we want to certainly have hope. But I'll always say this. We know so many oncologists have come on this show, Sadika, and they have said your best fight against cancer is early detection.
Hmm.
Early detection. And so when
Hmm.
you talk about the mammograms, the
Hmm.
colonoscopies, the men getting PSAs,
Hmm.
that's the key, right? I mean, and obviously you're right. Eating healthy, a healthy lifestyle. And I'm no provider, but we have providers on one, so chime in. Those things matter, but we all know real life stories of people that did all those things and they still got diagnosed because perhaps there's a genetic disposition there. Perhaps there's some environmental factors there. Some things that perhaps you just can't control. But early diagnosis is key. And you're right, when we talk about self-care, nothing wrong with getting your nails done and your hair done up or getting
That's
your facial.
maintenance.
You're right, and your makeup and you the face is beat, as the young ladies say, and the lashes. But all of that will mean nothing if we're not here to
Hmm.
celebrate life itself. And so I did want to mention that. And obviously for our vascular diseases that are out there, I know you're going to touch on this a little later. Obviously in our minds, it can be slower moving, but we do need to take those just as serious. And that's where those daily, not daily, but those annual checkups or quarterly checkups, whatever your physician has recommended, they're so, so key to take even the blood pressure, the hypertension diagnosis, all of those things very serious. I did want to give a shout out to those that are watching us right now. Shauna said the big 55 is knocking. She'll be 55 in December. I love it. I love it. Brandy Pinckney Green, who's a provider out of Atlanta, said prevention is self-care. Same thing you just echoed, and I certainly co-signed on. And KK said that Shauna, she'll be also 55 in November. I love 55 and looking fabulous, ladies. We also, Brandy Pinckney Green said, Silver Sneakers is a free program offered by most fitness centers. And she's right, Sadika, right? That's an opportunity to get in groups. You talked about girlfriends, or if you're a guy having somebody you can associate with. Say you're not social and you say you're introverted. She's right. Silver Sneakers allows you to meet other people, right?
Yeah, it does. And actually, some healthcare payers will cover Silver Sneakers. So I would definitely encourage you to reach out to your payer, whoever your healthcare provider is, your insurance provider. Reach out to see if they cover Silver Sneakers, because some do. And, you know, along the lines, we're talking about prevention, and we've already established that prevention is the best. Oftentimes we think, well, I just don't want to know. Yes, you want to know, because you want to take advantage of the technology and the treatments that are available out here. And so why have it available and you not take, advantage of it? So that's one of the things we want to do. And then also we want to educate ourselves. I mean, this phone is such a powerful weapon, because there's so much information. But when we're talking with our physicians, we want to be respectful, because we know that they put in a lot of education and a lot of time. So we want it to be conversational, and we want it to be, hey, doc, I found this information. What do you think? We want to take that type of approach. And then also we want to advocate for ourselves. We want to stand up. I read an article recently that said people of color and people in marginalized communities, when they present to the ER for a heart issue, and you mentioned heart earlier, oftentimes they don't get the same batteries of evaluations or treatments that other communities might get. So we want to come with our journal to make sure we take good notes around who we've talked with and what was done and the questions that were asked and the responses to the questions, and to make sure that we are our best advocate.
Yeah. And I love that. That is so, so key. And I've seen those studies as well. There have been some historical data out there and saying in different settings, right? Not just the ER, sometimes in office settings, seeing your primary care physician or specialist as well. There are people that will argue if it's true or not. I think it's not even worth an argument. Just go in with the information being empowered. Right? Because you don't know who you're going to encounter. You don't. But you know what you can bring, and you can bring the information. And if something doesn't feel right, if you do not feel you're getting fair treatment, it is time to demand for me to see another provider, because often it can be between life and death. Right. And we have to act fast. I know we have medical providers on right now watching us. You all know you have to act fast in so many situations, especially if you're talking about heart or even matters of the brain with aneurysms. These things cannot be, but we'll get around to it. Give us 2 or 3 days. You can be talking about a matter of life and death. Shauna Amore has a good question out of Atlanta Metro. She says, do you know what age the Silver Sneakers program starts off with? Sadika, do you know?
I think it's 55. But certainly someone can Google it, but I 5.
Thank you. Miss Willingham out of Atlanta Metro says hello. Hello, Tam. Thank you for joining us. She says, hello, sisters. KK said maintenance versus self-care. That's a great point to bring up, because we're going to talk about that. What exactly does that mean? Brandy Pinckney Green says every 3 to 6 months once stable. And I'm assuming that is reference to one of the tests, and you'll probably let us know, Brandy, if you're talking about A1C, I'm assuming, let us know, or PSA, let us know what you're referring to. You said every 3 to 6 months once stable. Kelly out of Atlanta is waving and said hello. Tam says education is key. Look up information and advocate for yourself. You absolutely said it best, and we are so thankful to have Dr. Z on with us out of Atlanta Metro as well. Thank you, Doc, for joining us. She says greetings, ladies. KK out of Atlanta says, with higher rates of conditions like heart disease and hypertension in the African American community, how can self-care play a role in improving physical health overall? That's a great question, Sadiqa. How can self-care play a role in improving physical health overall? That's a great question, because she's right. It does seem to be a heightened, well, lately, certainly we see more presence of heart disease, and some of those factors such as high blood pressure and dyslipidemia in the African community, obviously not just isolated and exclusive to the African American community, but we are talking about obviously serving all communities. And with minorities, she wants to know, how can self-care really play a role in heart disease? I know we talked about some of the screenings for cancers.
Right. Well, of course, with the heart disease, a lot, nutrition and exercise. Certainly you want to stay away from the carbs and the sweets and those things that are going to clog your arteries. So we want to stick with the healthy foods, the fruits and vegetables and lean meats, fish and chicken, those kinds of things. So definitely consult with your nutritionist. And many health plans have a nutritionist. And as we talked about earlier, shopping the exterior of the grocery store where all of the healthy foods are. And then even in terms of the exercise, getting that vigorous walk in your neighborhood.
Yes.
If you don't have a health gym, if you don't have a gym, or if you don't have a treadmill in the home, you have a neighborhood that you can walk. And so, take that brisk walk to get that heart pumping. Those are the things, the immediate things that we can do. And certainly always talking with your physician prior to starting any type of exercise regime is always the best policy.
That's such a great question. And we have Banasha on with us from Atlanta. Banasha, hello. We appreciate you. She is an acclaimed social worker. And she says she believes the age is 65 for silver sneakers. So I know she works with a lot of elderly, aging gracefully individuals in our community. So she says she thinks it is 65. Thank you, Banasha, for that information. We want your questions, comments, feedback. What has been your experience with your own aging process? If you're 39 or if you're 59, or what was it like to watch your grandmother or grandfather or your mom and dad age? Brandy Pinckney Green, of course, a provider out of Atlanta Metro, said, once diagnosed with a chronic illness such as hypertension, diabetes, or heart disease, follow-up should be about every 3 to 6 months. Don't wait for 9 months or to 1 year. Stay on top of the help that you have and be very proactive. Great point, Brandy. Sadiqa, what are your thoughts on that as an aging advocate? Brandy's like, the more frequent you can get in front of that provider with any chronic disease, you're going to be better off.
Oh yeah, and most providers recommend that you come every 3 months when you're on the hypertension medication and the diabetic medication, because they need to check your labs and make sure that your kidneys are still working properly, and make sure that the dose is appropriate for you, etc. So that's definitely recommended. And what I'd like to say, especially with the hypertension medication, I've noticed people will say, oh, I started feeling better, so I stopped taking my medication. No. You want to continue to feel better. So that's why you need to continue to take your medications. And people, certainly people that have their insurance will cover these things. People who are on Medicare will cover it. Those who may have trouble, sometimes you can reach out to the manufacturer and get the manufacturer to, assist you with covering your medication. So that's an alternative as well.
Absolutely. And such a great point to make sure that we're seeing them. Real talk for real people. I've had an opportunity to work and meet and interview and report with so many different people, walks of life, which I've always been fascinated with humanity and who humans are, that we're some of the most resilient beings on this earth. I would certainly say that highs and lows, so many humans keep going and pushing. But I've also got to say one thing, and often when people are diagnosed with a chronic disease, and Brandy, thank you for bringing that up, if it's hypertension, if it's dyslipidemia, if it's diabetes or pre-diabetes, which is rampant now in the United States, right? What I often see is people will be like, well, I'll go back because that doctor's just going to put me on medicine. That doctor's just going to fuss at me. And Sadiqa, what happens, and I think they mean well because they initially go to the doctor's office, right? But then I don't know if when they walk out of there, they're feeling bad about how the reality has sunk in. And I saw this in previous careers. People do not return to the doctor. They don't. They come back a year later. So many providers that I know would tell me they come in 2 or 3 years later saying, you know, I don't feel well. I'm numb in my feet. And you were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 3 years ago. And so I think Brandy is so right. And I know this is real talk for real people, Sadiqa. So chime in. I know it can be tiresome to say, I got to go to a doctor or go see somebody every 3 to 6 months. I know the last thing you're saying is I got to keep up with this medication and that medication. And maybe it's a shot for your diabetes, whatever it is. But Sadiqa, please emphasize us as an aging advocate. I get they're busy. I get people can get tired of things, but just really emphasize the need, the life need of how they've got to be on top of the visitations to the provider.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? Think about your children and your grandchildren. You want to be here to see the high school and college graduations. You want to see the piano recitals. You know, you want to attend the basketball games.
That's right.
So you want to be here for them. And then also you want to be an example. And so, you know, it does require lifestyle changes. And certainly our lifestyle adjustments, lifestyle pivots. Maybe that'll be a softer phrase. And then, like we said, having a buddy, someone to walk with you on this journey and doing it in small bits. I know someone who has meatless Mondays. So that's her way.
Beautiful.
So on Mondays, no meat, purely vegetables, and always lots of water. So take it in small chunks, lifestyle pivots, as well as visits to the doctor and, you know, taking your medication. I mean, the medication is here for a reason. We have technology and all of the advances. Take advantage of it. I mean, people who came before us didn't have the advantages. And I bet so many of them wish they had it. And so if we have it, let's take advantage of it.
I love it. I love it. And such a key point. You know, one of the individuals who's frequent a friend of this show and they're exercise advocate, they have always said, you've got to figure out what your why is, right? If you don't have that why up front or in the back of the front, you're going to miss out. And the why for so many people has to be the next generation, right? Because let's be real, Sadiqa, sugar tastes good. And that's a conversation so many of us that try to advocate and help, we miss that part because we tell people, well, eat right and do this. But we know that there are so many cases that sugar can be more addictive than drugs, such as a crack cocaine or heroin, which we all know that can be a very strong drugs, right? Of previous eras and even now still being utilized. So if you think of sugar in that sense, we know why obesity takes place in the world, right? We do. We know why you're overeating 2 and 3 pieces of the pie. Because it tastes good and it's flaring up the cells in the body and they're going wacky. The body wants it. But you're right. At the end of the day, the discipline, that D word, has to exist because so many mothers and so many fathers talk about loving their kids. And I'll die for my kids. I'll do this for my kids. When was your last mammogram? When was the colonoscopy? When was your last pap smear? You do anything for them, but doing anything for them is also being able to be here for them, right? Right. And I'm just going to go here. It's not always saying, you know, necessarily I'm going to go up to the school and I'm going to speak with the teacher about a situation. It's about you being present, and to be present, you've got to take care of your body. And this isn't a doom and gloom show, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's a real show because real things can happen to real people. And we all know that. And it's simply about empowering yourself with the tools and the resources that we have. I did want to give more acknowledgments to the questions coming in. KK says, and you know your body. She says, do not ignore the signs. Such a great point, KK. I've met so many survivors of so many different conditions and diseases, and not for everybody, but certainly a lot of those women and men have shared with me that there were symptoms of things that went on that they said it'll be fine, it's just an ache in my tummy, and then it ended up being other things, an ulcer
Yeah.
perhaps, and not always extreme like that, but you do have to follow up on pain that's consistent, things that are bothering you. Or I'm going to say this, as my grandmother would say, just your gut feeling and discernment that something's off. You don't feel like yourself.
Right.
I also want to say Brandy Pinkney Green has again said hypertension can be a silent killer. Absolutely. You can have high blood pressure and feel phenomenal, right? There's some people that report, vertigo or dizziness, but not everybody. There's so many people I know that have high blood pressure that were feeling great until the doctor said, you've got high blood pressure. Right. So, and one of the things, Sticky, they'll often do, well, I only have high blood pressure when I go to the doctor's office. And in a previous life, I had a career where I got to meet and speak with so many physicians and cardiologists. And one of the cardiologists said something to me that was real. She said she had a woman that kept saying, I'm only nervous because I'm in here and you all are, and I hate the doctor. And she said, she told the woman, so the only time you get upset in life, the only time you're anxious, the only time you're nervous is when you come through my door. It's not when you're in traffic. It's not when you have a disagreement with your spouse or significant other. It's not when your child has disappointed you or they're consistently doing behavior you don't approve of. So that's the only time no, it's not. It's not. And so we have to be real about hypertension. And sometimes we can do everything right and it's still there. You have to go get treated. Shauna says, believe it or not, she says, and I'm a culprit of it. Low iron anemia is big in the African-American female population. Absolutely. She says, I've been anemic for years and was told to take iron and I didn't. I take it for a week or two and then I would stop. And the last time it was 2 years ago. So Sadiqa, that's a prime example. And Shauna, thank you for your transparency. I've talked to real people. I've interviewed hundreds if not thousands of people. I know that is what goes on, Sadiqa, that people, they'll go get the diagnosis, right? And they mean well, but then something slips out of their routine. What would be your advice for that? I know you said you've got to have, I'm saying your why, the motivation of the kids, but what else could help Shauna or the millions of other women like her?
Well, you know what I was thinking about? Treat yourself. You can't deny yourself of everything. So, for example, if you enjoy dark chocolate, certainly you can't have it every day, but maybe you can have a piece once a week. And that's something to look forward to. It's something to motivate you. Okay, if I'm going to get out here and I'm going to walk and I'm going to get up from my desk every hour and a half and drink so much water, then at the end of the week, I'm going to treat myself with this dark chocolate. Yeah. So sometimes it does take that. You have to kind of, give yourself, because we're human.
And even for
we need the motivation.
Yeah. And even for taking medicine, right? Being compliant with the medicine, you're saying whatever, make sure we're not obviously counteracting what medicine it is, but you're right to reward yourself, whatever that is, by saying you got your prescription this month for your iron pills, right? Then reward yourself, whatever would balance it out that you're not contradicting, of course. But even if it's something from your favorite coffee shop, shout out to National Coffee Day on September the 29th. I live with coffee lovers, so I did want to point that out. But something like that, Sadiqa, you're right, because it motivates you to say, if I'm being compliant with my medicine, if I'm walking like I should, if I'm taking my cholesterol medicine like I should, then hey, it's nothing wrong if I'm treating myself. I don't want to get in people's pockets, but even if it's a massage once a month, something of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I wanted to say, because I did take a moment to Google, and yes, with the silver sneakers, it is 65 plus.
Thank you. So thank you. So our social worker was right. Thank you.
Yes, she was.
Thank you. So those that are young at 55, you can wait another decade to be in silver sneakers, or you can just put on your shoes and start walking now.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you, Shauna, for your transparency. We appreciate it. I think there's so many women, so many women and men that actually go through that. Brandy said, who's a provider out of Atlanta Metro, and regarding what we spoke about, and also Shauna testified to, she said it's called pill fatigue, and it's important for the provider to recognize that as well. So true. Thank you for putting the proper medical name on it, Brandy. I've known just real people throughout life. They just said they're tired of taking it. They've said it. Some people people do it for different reasons. Some know that they can't take their hypertensive pills if they drink alcohol, and maybe they use the weekend as that time. So they often stop there and never pick right back up. Different reasons why. And I'm going to be real. We know everything has a side effect. Water has a side effect if you're taking too much of it. But I think it's so important if we keep in mind that we can speak with our provider, where we should be able, Sadiqa and Brandy, to speak with our providers about a medication, seeing if there are other options out there, because there often are, right? There are very few drugs that are in a category by themselves. Very few. If those tend to be those cases, those chronic diseases or diagnoses tend to be very rare. So do ask, be proactive. And like you said, Sadiqa, when you go to the ER, let's be proactive. We go to our physicians, let's be proactive about it. Do you think that being proactive is something, Sadiqa, that some women and men may struggle with, because perhaps they think that the providers such as Brandy and Dr. Z are the experts and they're not?
And I alluded to that earlier, but we have to have confidence in ourselves. And there's a lot of information at our fingertips. So we do want to educate ourselves and be able to have a conversation with your practitioner. Now, what I will say is stick with it. Certainly, there are reasons why you may leave your physician, but it's best if you've got a good one that you trust, one that you believe in, one that you've been recommended to you, and you've checked out the credentials, etc. Stick with that person so that you can have a relationship. He or she knows you, you know them. They may even know your family. When I go to my doctor, she'll ask about my son, and I get so tickled about it, because I said she must have in the EMR record, ask about son. Surely she. So so build a relationship with your healthcare provider, and don't be afraid to ask questions. I actually believe people who ask questions are more respected.
Yeah, I definitely think, because I think, and I know we have some educators on, and KK, please feel free to chime in out of Atlanta. But she would come on the show and she talked about there's a difference between being present and being engaged. And I do think, and I'm not saying that's true for every provider, but I certainly think if you take an interest in your health, you're likely going to maybe get better results from a provider. I want to be clear. I'm not saying that should be a prerequisite, because, obviously there's a Hippocratic oath that providers take to serve all people, right? Some people are more versed, some people are more educated than others in that, Sadiqa, and for all of our listeners and viewers. But I do think it's important to try to be as powered as much as possible. There's some people that there aren't going to be for some different reasons. Maybe it's they could be a capability dealing with a handicap. Maybe they just weren't exposed to that sort of presentation, if you will. You kind of shake your head and then say, I'm going to throw out the prescription, I'm not going to do it, whatever your reasoning is. But hopefully platforms like Let's Talk America is one that's here to help you with it. I love it. We're going to keep going, because for the interest of time, I know it's Sunday evening.
And I'd like to add to that, you're right. There are some people that can be shy about asking questions. And I would recommend to bring a patient champion, and bring an advocate, bring a buddy, someone with you who can hear the information, can share it back with you, what was stated. Someone who can help to answer with the questions that you might have. Absolutely. And then someone just to kind of be your advocate, where your voice is not there, they're able to be your voice. And there are actually, especially among the older adult community, there are actually some physicians and some specialties that will say, please bring someone with you. And, someone to actually verify or confirm the information that the patient is sharing with the physician.
Love it.
So that's always an alternative.
And that's so key. And that doesn't mean they have to come with you with every appointment. But if there's something you're going through that makes you uncomfortable, scary, maybe it's a cancer follow-up diagnosis, bring a girlfriend. And obviously, Sadiqa, it's going to be someone you trust, right? Someone that you're okay with hearing your medical information in front of. But you've got to, even if they're there for moral support, right? You don't have to do this alone. And if you're saying, well, I don't have anybody I can trust, I don't like people in my business, well, that's okay. But then let's have a conversation, and we can even speak with our medical assistants that are in the office and say, they're going to be within me for this portion. I would appreciate if you don't discuss the other part. That can happen too. So just know you can speak with them about that to give them heads up what that person is there for. KK says anemia, and this is for those who are anemic and talking about struggling with pill fatigue or non-compliance. She said anemia is what caused her heart attack. So I think it goes back to one of the advocates and experts that come on our show. What is your why? And I think so many times we hear diagnosis, Sadiqa, right? We hear prediabetes, we hear diabetes, we hear gout, we hear, kidney disease. We're all these things, but it goes in one ear and out the other. The reality is there are things that can be very serious. And again, this isn't doom or gloom. You're providing awesome solutions to aging wisely, being smart about it. But the reality is there are some things that can lead to some very serious things such as death, right? We cannot ignore, there's some cancer readings that we're just going to ignore. We're not going to follow back up. You can't do that. You can't let a doctor tell you you've been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and your A1C is 17.3 and you're not following up, because there's a danger to that, right? It's just not my sugar's out of whack. What does your sugar out of whack do to your body? It's tearing up your organs. It can cause a heart attack, right? So we've got to make sure we are being we're understanding what a diagnosis is, and not the doctor just trying to make money off the pharmaceutical company. And I'm not saying there isn't a balance to people wanting to express that, but I can assure you, if a doctor's telling you you have type 2 diabetes or you have other conditions, that he or she is not telling you that to make money or profit off of it. There's an A1C reading, and you can speak to any endocrinologist or provider that can talk with you about that it's serious. And I know many people I love dearly that have lived 50 years with type 2 diabetes. But you know what each of them have in common, Sadiqa? They were compliant. They were compliant.
And it's like anything, you can ignore it, it's not going to go away. That oil light on your car will come on, and you can ignore it if you want to, and the next thing you know, your engine is going to be gone.
That's right.
So and just like we tell our children, you can't ignore these things. The same things we tell our children, we have to tell ourselves. And you can be nervous. It's natural to be nervous. It's natural to be afraid. But we have to rally the support group. Get your support group together. Hone in on your faith. And just be strong and accept, as we said, the resources, the technology, and the medications that are available to you, and you'll live a longer life for it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I thank you for saying that and being so transparent. Being afraid is a human factor, right? And I think so many times we have this notion, and you see all these things that sort of go viral, that you gotta have the courage, you gotta put fear out of you. And trust me, I get what they're trying to accomplish, right? I've heard some of the greatest motivational speakers in the world in person. I get it. But it's also a power in being vulnerable. There's power in saying, I'm scared because I know what sometimes these diagnoses can do, right? But it's okay to say that. Acknowledge the feeling, acknowledge what's happening, and have the strength, like you said, through others, through prayer, through meditation, whatever helps you get through that support system. The people that love you, the people you love, or remember your why, you can walk in that oncologist's office shaking. But if you're shaking, at least you walked in because you have 2 daughters you care about. And that, my friend, is real courage. Yelling at a camera, going viral on Instagram means nothing to me. I've seen it all. But what's real courage is doing what makes you afraid and still doing it because you've got some people to live for. Or even if you have a mother that loves you, who's 85, who loves her daughter and does not want to bury her daughter. These are things we have to allow to motivate us. KK, who is a heart attack survivor and a beautiful person inside and out, we certainly appreciate her always supporting us. She said, be careful, you can get iron through the IV. So that's a great point for somebody that said they struggle with non-compliance of iron pills. She's right. And I know also I have loved ones that suffer with anemia. I know some of the iron pills do have and Brandy chime in, Dr. Z chime in if you're with us. I know the side effect for a lot of iron pills is constipation. Real talk for real people, right? I have girlfriends that have been very honest with me about that. Speak with your provider or go to the pharmacist, that very smart person in that white jacket behind the pharmacy. wall wherever you go, and tell them what you're experiencing. You can speak with them in private. They respect you as well, and they may be able to offer you a solution to sort of counteract or help balance some of that constipation, because there are solutions out there. Okay, everybody. We have a gentleman
Mhm.
on with us. We have Chutney out of Atlanta. Thank you, sir, for being with us. He said, "How can you push male friends to get physicals without being intrusive?" Sadiq, I'm going to say that again because we've had a lot of women talk about self-care, and you're a woman, you're
Mhm.
phenomenal, but you have an
Mhm.
amazing son and husband. So I'm going to ask
Mhm.
that again. How can
Mhm.
we push male friends or male
Mhm.
counterparts to get physicals without being intrusive? Thank you,
Mhm.
Chutney, for bringing that up, because I'm not saying
Mhm.
this is true for every male out there, and a huge
Mhm.
fan of the male gender. I am.
Yes, we
But
are.
sometimes they can be very sensitive about saying, go
Mhm.
get your PSA, or sensitive about the last time you've asked about a physical. Sadika, give
Yeah.
us words of wisdom.
Well, you know what? I think it goes back to, if you know better, do better, and share the information. I
Yeah.
think the men are going to have to help each other on this one, because the women in their lives, we are talking to them about it and we are reminding them.
Yes.
But it's just something about that male culture. But we're definitely going to have to help them, and take it to where they are. Take it to the barber shops,
That's right.
to the
Beautiful.
cigar lounges. Maybe they may be too relaxed to want to listen to it, but I mean, we have to meet them where they are,
Yeah.
give them, true. We have so many examples of, men that did not get the
Yeah.
examination, and then
Yeah.
look what happened. So, yeah, so the brothers are going to have to help brothers. Brothers are going to have to help sisters to
That's
help the
right. That's
brothers,
right.
and just continue to meet them where they are, continue to educate and encourage, and let them know that we love them and we want them to be around for a long time with us.
Yeah.
And this is what you have to do. And actually, if you think about it, and they probably hate to hear this, our examinations are far worse, are
Yes.
far more
Yes.
intrusive, I should say.
Yes.
So if we
So,
can
so
have our
true.
examinations, they can have theirs.
So, and just a friendly reminder for anybody watching us, if you happen to be 16 years old, or if you happen to be 55 years old, PSAs is a blood test. Okay, PSAs are done through a blood test, so it is not invasive. I mean, you may not like needles, and nobody does, but it's a quick prick. That is done through a blood test. So
Mhm.
please make sure you are getting that done, because prostate cancer is real, especially in the African American community. Samantha Rollins, we appreciate you being on. She says, we all say we'll die for our kids, but will we live for our kids by taking care of ourselves? Thank you for echoing that. We touched on that
Mhm.
earlier. Such a great point. So many people say it, and I know they mean it. I'll die for mine. I'll do anything for my kids. But if
Mhm.
we're not getting the pap smears, if we're not
Mhm.
getting the colonoscopies, right?
Mhm.
If we're not following back up on our kidney disease, it sounds good and love it, right? But if we gonna
Mhm.
hype ourselves up, let's really hype ourselves up into Monday morning calling our primary provider, or going to our favorite search engine if we don't
Mhm.
have one, and putting in primary care provider. And if you want a male, you can put in male. You want a female, you can find whatever you think is going to make you comfortable, because you've got to
Mhm.
get these screenings in. Thank you. Brandy Pinckney Green says, visit gmbhealthcare.org, gmbhealthcare.org. I'm assuming that's going to tell us a lot of the screenings and how to follow up. Thank you, Brandy, for that. Shannon out of Atlanta Metro says, yes, I also encourage others to bring written questions or notes to appointments. I love it,
Mhm.
Shannon.
Mhm.
Such a great point.
Mhm.
Because I'll say this. How many times have we, and I'm speaking for myself, Sadiq, I want you to share too. How many
Mhm.
times have we gone to our providers and we're like, what was it, something I was supposed to ask? And we remember 3 days later. Like, I was going to ask them about that vitamin. I was going to tell them my grandmother was diagnosed with this 50 years ago.
Mhm.
What do you say about so many of us meaning well, but we don't really follow up?
Yeah. Oh, actually, I'm one of the ones that make notes. I have the notes ahead of time and bring it, and I encourage families to do that as well. But yeah, it's all about being proactive in your self care. And the thing about it is that so many of us live in this world where we're juggling so many
Yes.
responsibilities. As you mentioned, we have our children. We may even have young adult children, and then we have our aging parents. And I often think about, I like to use the analogy that the airline with the airlines, when you're flying, the attendant says, in case of loss of pressure, put the
Yes.
mask on yourself first and then assist others. And so when you think about this self-care journey, and then going to the doctor, preparing the notes ahead of time, doing your research, bringing your medications with you so that the doctor can
Yes.
see, what you're already taking. If he or she's going to prescribe something else, they're there so that they can see what may interact with the other. You may be seeing other specialists that are prescribing medications that your primary care physician is not aware of. So you really want to bring your whole scope of care, even
Yes.
if if you had, like I did a couple of years ago, a fractured an ankle, and you went to
Yes.
see an orthopedic. Your primary care doctor may not be aware of that, but she needs to know. So,
Correct.
so you want to share your full scope
Mm-hmm.
of what's going on with you, so that they can
Yeah.
be aware as they
So
continue
true.
to, yes, care for you.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
No, go ahead, Sadika.
I think I lost my train of
Such,
thought, but
such a
you're
great
good.
conversation. We both are
Yeah.
so motivated. And I
Hmm.
love the passion that you're bringing to this. And you hit on something about, right, in theory, I've heard people say when I was in the field reporting, oh, they're supposed to know that, right? And we do know we have more and more of a universal healthcare system in terms of your reports, more of your medical records following you. Absolutely. But for the providers that are watching us, and if you want to be real, we all know, though, providers are swamped. And
Hmm.
yes, in theory, they're reviewing your records before they come in the room. But we also know, Sadika, if we're 50 years old, that's a long record list, right? And if you're
Hmm.
80 years old, that's 30 years on top of it. So the
Hmm.
reality is they're looking at, what are you here for? If it's they're looking at what came from the orthopedics, what came from the oncologist. There are things that are more pressing in their minds. And we know they're not going to sit with you 3 and 4 hours, right? And that may be how
Hmm.
long it takes to go through your medical history and the questions you have. So
Hmm.
I certainly am with you. If you're ever in a situation where you went to the ER 5 weeks ago, and well, he should know I went to the ER. No, you have to explain to him. And sometimes I'll say this: too much information is just enough information, because do not assume, well, the doctor knows, I'm not going to ask a question. I know so many grown people, Sadiq, and it's like, I'm not going to bombard them. They're doing too much talking. This is your life and this is your body. And if you're
Hmm.
not going to ask or advocate for it, trust me, nobody is coming to save you but you. So
Right.
at the end of the day, you're right. Mention those things, or even ask them. You remember when I saw you 6 months ago, I mentioned
Hmm.
that the headaches were getting worse. You
Hmm.
need to bring that back up, because
Yeah.
believe it or not, and providers have my utmost respect on all that they do, but it's like teachers, they have a lot to do.
Yeah.
And they can't walk around with just 50 years of your medical business in their head. And even if they're looking at it again, if you're 50 years old, that's a lot of medical records. They
Yeah.
just don't have an hour to go through. They don't. And so
Right.
you've got to be proactive. I love that.
Yeah.
Shauna
And
out of Atlanta
oh,
Metro. Go ahead. Go ahead.
the other thing I was going to say is family history. When you're
Yes.
filling out your medical records, often they're asked family history.
Yes.
Is there a history of hypertension or diabetes?
Yes.
It's important for families to discuss those things, because genetics plays a big part in your health
Yes.
care. Amen. And this month, September, is Sickle Cell Awareness Month.
Yeah.
And so many of us, I think I read somewhere where it's 1 in 13 African Americans have the sickle cell trait.
Yes.
So therefore, it's important to know your family health history, and educate yourself around what that means.
Yes, that is such an
Mhm.
important part, because I think sometimes we also have to be honest, right? Because they'll ask questions on there that make many people uncomfortable. Well, did this run in your family? Well, you know your uncle had this, but you're not being very realistic about it, right? It's almost
Mhm.
like people answering the question about drug use. How many people
Mhm.
are really being honest? No, they've
Mhm.
never had any alcoholic drinks. And I'm like, now come on. Like,
Right.
and it's not illegal if that's what you, but you have to be honest with the provider. You cannot say
Mhm.
you don't smoke and you do smoke, right?
Right.
You cannot say you don't drink, you, because that could be, he could be, or she could be prescribing medications that are going to counteract with that.
That's
Shauna
right.
out of Atlanta said, I'll be starting my iron regimen back tomorrow. We love it. Sadiqa, she's back motivated, taking it.
Yes,
Thank you, Shauna.
yes,
It's
good.
all about motivation, educating, and inspiring those. If you just
Mm-hmm.
walked in on us or you're
Mm-hmm.
catching the replay, you're watching the award-winning Let's Talk America with host Shana Thornton podcast. I'm Shana, your on-air host and executive producer. I have the one and only Sadiqa Gibson on with us. She is an aging advocate out of Atlanta Metro. We love and adore her advocacy and her platform. And she's really breaking down some helpful tips for all of us to really age in a graceful manner that we're still feeling good inside and out. Brandy did mention, Sadiqa, yes, constipation is a side effect to the iron pills, as was mentioned earlier. Rochelle Rodriguez is with us out of Atlanta Metro. Hello, Rochelle. She said, hi, everyone. I'm sorry for being late. This is so important. I let myself go when I had to have a hysterectomy recently because I had a massive fibroid on my uterus. Thank you for being so transparent, Rochelle. We appreciate you joining us. Sadiqa, she's talking about letting herself go. And I guess she's talking about not really following up and probably having some of the symptoms and things, but putting it off. So many people do it, right? I think more do it than not. Sadiqa, what would be your pearls of wisdom in terms of trying to say, stop putting it off? You said the why, but we get caught up in our schedule, lady.
Oh, yeah. Well, before you can love others, you have to love yourself first. And so self-love is paramount. And actually, a lot of times we go through things and we think that we're alone, but we're not. There are a lot of women who have had fibroids.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard of women having fibroids the size of a chicken and having to have those removed and having the various surgeries that are appropriate for that. So you're not alone. And there's so many support groups. There are face-to-face support groups. There are Facebooks that are virtual. I mean, Facebooks.
Yeah.
There are support groups that are virtual as well.
And that are on Facebook.
So, yes, that are on Facebook. Absolutely. And then I'm sure you have church members. So there's always someone that you can reach out to and have a conversation with around whatever you're going through. You're never alone in just about anything that you go through in life's journey. And just know that you are worth it and to love yourself.
I love that. Love yourself. I mean, you're so right. And loving ourselves. And we've got to, because so many of us, we have grands or children or nieces and nephews, but to love them, right? It goes back to what was said earlier by Miss Rollins. But we say we love them, but we've got to be able to be here to love them. Because you can't witness them grow. You can't witness the graduation of the birth of your first grandbaby if you're not here, right? And we know there are people that can do everything and stuff still happens, but we're talking about doing stuff within your control, which the one and only Sadiqa Gibson says is a part of self-care. We're going to begin to wrap up here because what a great conversation, Sadiqa. We got to have you back on. But Glenn Collins out of Atlanta says, I would suggest doing your research on your medications. You should know the potential side effects of your meds. What a great point, Sadiqa, that he's making. And that goes back into the E word of empowerment that you brought up. You're saying make sure you're going in with questions and you know exactly what's going on. And he's right. And I think knowing a lot of it, Sadiqa, would probably also help you prepare mentally and emotionally that, hey, this could possibly be a side effect. But I'll tell you a little secret. Most side effects of medicines aren't enough to stop them. I'm not saying that's true for all side effects, but I will say that. And I guess if we go in knowing and being educated about it, perhaps we're aware that, okay, maybe that ache wasn't as bad as I thought, or running to the restroom a little more did not take me off course.
Right. Actually, that's a great question. And we did speak earlier about so much information is at your fingertips. So certainly you can research the side effects. When you go to the pharmacist to pick up your medication, that piece of paper has a listing of what the side effects are.
Yes.
You can talk to the pharmacist. And that's one of the things. The pharmacist is a healthcare professional that is probably a little underutilized, although that individual can get very, very busy. I do understand that. But at the same time, always ask questions. Usually they have a little consultation corner there that you can go into and they'll talk with you about it. Because even sometimes you may be taking a medication and it's a certain color or a certain shape, and you've gotten accustomed to that, and then you come and get it the next time and it's a different color and a different shape.
Mhm.
So you want, and but usually it's due to a different manufacturer. So
Yes.
but that's good to be aware of this. This shows that I'm really
Correct.
watching what I'm putting into my
Correct.
body. And in terms of the side effects, so many of us know, and I probably won't be accurate in my number, but when they're doing these trials, they are testing it on like thousands of people. So whatever side effect comes up, it's going to be listed. But that doesn't mean that you're going
That's
to
correct.
have one or all or any of these
Correct.
side
That's
effects
very
that
true.
are labeled. Yeah.
That's
So I
very
mean,
true.
yeah. So the
And
best
and I
thing.
thank you for saying that, because I think that is real, because I think sometimes people, not all the times, but obviously can hype themselves up with this side effect and that side effect. Well, then you probably wouldn't be taking anything if that's the case. But I will
Right.
tell you this, as someone who's worked in an industry in a previous life of mine, but the side effect of not treating your blood pressure can be a stroke, which can lead to death.
Oh
Right.
yes.
So we talk about the side effect of medications, but we need to
Mhm.
be talking about the side effects of the disease states too. So
Mhm.
let's not get past Mr. Forest past the trees, because sometimes people are so adamant against medications that they miss
Mhm.
the boat that you do have heart disease though, right? You do
Mhm.
have cancer, right? You
Mhm.
do have lupus. So you cannot pretend it's all about the medications, because if it's not going to be treated, what is the true side effect going to be? So
Mhm.
correct. And thank you for saying that, because when
Mhm.
it's done on thousands of people, that doesn't mean it necessarily will happen to you. And again, I'll say this, we've all taken an antihistamine that can leave your mouth dry for a few hours, but is and I'll say this, everybody is different, but is that really enough for you not to take the antihistamine to stop from
Mhm.
sneezing and sniffling your nose every 5 seconds?
Mhm.
We've got to we've got to make sure we're weighing the benefits against what's not beneficial too. Because
Mhm.
and again, I'm not here to push any agenda. We're here for balanced talk. But if the cholesterol medicine is going to save you from a deadly heart attack,
Mhm.
you've got to ask yourself, is a little bit of AIDS something I'm able to deal with? Because I
Mhm.
do not want to be in a rehabilitation center for 3 years before I go out of
Mhm.
here because I had a stroke or heart attack. I refuse to get treated.
Mhm.
It's for me, Sadika, it's logic. Am I right or
Mhm.
wrong?
Oh no, you're absolutely right. Because and also if you think about it, almost anything we do, there's a risk. We could go into the grocery store and something, could happen. You
Yeah.
get in the car and something, there's always a risk. But what we have to do is kind of weigh it. So if the benefit outweighs the risk is
There you go.
minuscule to the benefit. I want the benefit.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
Such a
Mhm.
powerful point, and I appreciate you saying that. Renee out of Atlanta says we must take care of ourselves and listen to the health providers, but you are your best advocate for yourself. Thank you, for Renee. That is such a powerful point. And Sadika, that's what you're all about. You're saying it's
Mhm.
about empowering yourself because you care about yourself. Because we know Mel Robbins, the famous philosopher, motivational speaker on Instagram and Facebook, went viral for saying no one's coming to save you. No one's coming to
Mhm.
save you to get off that couch to go for a walk. No one's coming
Mhm.
to save you if you want to eat fried pork chops. No offense to the fried pork chop piggies, but
Mhm.
you want to eat it every single day and you know it's going to affect your cholesterol. But if that's
Mhm.
what you want to do, no one's going to save you. And to Renee's point, and Sadiqa, which you've echoed throughout this program, you've
Mhm.
got to have the discipline yourself to stop it. Because we can't say no one helped me and they tried to help you and you didn't listen.
Mhm. Mhm.
That I do.
Mhm.
And I do want to say something here. And this is not saying, of course, that all providers are right and all pharmacists are right. But I will say we all have an area of expertise, right?
Mhm.
And I will say if you're going to go to the provider and you're not going to listen or take heed, what is the point of you going to them, right? And that doesn't mean that you can't question, you can't have an intellectual balanced conversation about your
Mhm.
health and the alternative medication they perhaps are putting you on. No one's not saying that. But if you're
Mhm.
not going to do anything they're saying, I will say it defeats the purpose of it. Because if you're not going to buy into 100% of it, maybe it's 80% of it. But at the end of the day, and I'll say this, search engines are great, Sadika, but search engines didn't give me a medical degree.
That's
Right. And I do want to say that because a lot of people say, well, I
mhm.
researched this and this is all I
Mhm.
need to do.
Mhm.
Like, there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet that's wrong too,
Mhm.
right? And we've got to know that, because just because someone says it, just because somebody writes an article says it's a money grab, it doesn't make it true. And these
Mhm.
same people, right, can give you testimonies that could be true or not true. And so let's just, obviously, I do want to respect the medical community, because they've
Mhm.
gone to school for a lot of years to
Mhm.
learn some important things. And I can assure each and every one of you, your research on Google is not going to outbeat a physician's
That's
research.
right.
Okay, so let's not fool ourselves. I'm empowered now. I went on Google. Like, no, you still need to see that provider, but stay empowered. Shauna Moore says she does have the trait for sickle cell. Thank
Mhm.
you for sharing that with us. In September is sickle cell anemia awareness month. So thank you so much. And you said something I often hear my dad says years ago when he was growing up, they didn't test for it. Now in recent years, babies are tested
Yeah.
obviously in the hospital. The mother is actually, I'll say this as a mother myself, you're
Mhm.
tested mostly when you're pregnant. So they'll
Mhm.
know. And then the concern is not there. If I don't have the trait, obviously it wouldn't matter if the father did or not. The child cannot have full-blown sickle cell anemia. But if the mother has the trait, they do often try to follow up with the father to make sure
Mhm.
if he has the trait, so they're fully aware and you're educated before that
Mhm.
child is born, possibly with sickle cell anemia, which there's
Mhm.
so many tough survivors, but it can be a very, very challenging disease, Sadika.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing about it, as you mentioned, education,
Mhm.
educating yourself about it. And not that you want to walk around in fear, thinking,
Yes.
"Oh, I have the trait, and I have to ask everyone that I'm dating." But
Yes.
you have to educate yourself and be aware of it. Share the information with your family. Make sure that you're getting the appropriate medical treatment. There's some the bone marrow treatment and other
Yes.
things that are out there. So there's a
Yes.
lot of progress that has been made.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
so we want to, continue to support the foundation and other
Absolutely.
organizations so that they continue the
Absolutely.
research and helping those and supporting people who are warriors, sickle cell
Yes, right.
warriors.
They
Yes.
are. They're
As
warriors. So many warriors out there. We have lupus warriors, cancer warriors. Certainly, we're entering October. We know is well
Mhm.
known for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Shout out and
Mhm.
congratulations to all of the survivors, and rest in peace. And your legacy lives on for those who have lost the battle to cancer, not just breast cancer, but any cancer. But the legacy lives on for each of
Mhm.
us, Sadika, to make sure we're getting tested and screened in their memory. In their
That's right.
memory. Renee out of
Absolutely.
Atlanta says, do not be afraid to share your medical family history. This is so important. She's right with the physicians. And Sadiqa, I
Mhm.
think you're right. I mean, when
We
people
talked
talk
about it.
about courting and dating and marriage, and for many people, it wouldn't change a thing, right? And I'm not here to
Right.
say it should, but you do need to at least have the information if the
Mhm.
person to speak with them, especially if you have the trait. Right. If you
Mhm.
have the trait, you do want to obviously discuss that and just ask your husband or partner, do they have the trait? So you can be empowered when you visit your OBGYN. And obviously the OBGYN can help then establish a medical routine or that's going to happen to make sure that baby, when they're born, that pediatrician's fully made aware that baby
Mhm.
you could have sickle cell anemia.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yes.
lots of warriors living and thriving with it, but it can be a very tough, challenging disease. Do not want
Mhm.
to downplay that. And
Mhm.
like you said, continue to support the awareness and what those organizations do. Glenn out of Atlanta said, ladies, we appreciate you all, especially those who encourage us men to visit our physicians on a regularly scheduled basis. Thank you, sir. We appreciate
Mhm.
that. See, Sadiqa, not all men
Mhm.
are complaining that their woman's helping them.
Okay, good.
Glenn is saying they appreciate the women that are doing that. Thank you, sir. Shauna says, excellent show. Thank you, ladies. We appreciate you, Shauna. Thank you so much. As we begin to wrap up, thank you, Rochelle. She said, aging gracefully and naturally is so important. It starts with gut health, medical care, self care, and
Mhm.
being open to a regimen that is professional with the right ingredients for your skin. I love this topic. Thank you,
Mhm.
Rochelle, is esthetician. So
Yeah.
talk about self-care, but also
Mhm.
when we talk about health, we know the largest organ on our body is the skin, right?
Mhm.
And that is, she's
Mhm.
so right to make sure that we're taking care of it. And not just for cosmetic reasons, but also, and I'm gonna say this, Rochelle, I'm sure you would appreciate this, to pay attention to abnormal growth, that's happening, moles or
Mm-hmm.
things that seem a little out of whack, paying
Mm-hmm.
attention to abnormal things on your neck as well and on your back.
Right.
Because just a reminder, skin cancer is real. Skin cancer is real for minority populations as well. You can be Hispanic and African
Mm-hmm.
American and still
Mm-hmm.
be diagnosed. I think that is an urban myth. I have a friend that is a survivor of skin cancer. She is African American. She is dark skinned African American. She is a proud survivor. But do not assume because you are African American, you have melanin in your skin, that you cannot get skin cancer,
Mm-hmm.
Sadika.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And then also moles.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of African Americans have moles. So yeah,
Yes.
definitely see your dermatologist. I think now they're doing body scans where they'll do a full body check, and
Yeah.
then and then of course have them check for cancer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and paying attention to your body is so important. Michelle out of Columbia, South Carolina says very informative, and we appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
She says thank you so much. And Patricia, don't hold on for 1 second. So quick mommy moment. Thank you. When you're
I
talking
figured
about
it was.
multitasking. Thank you very much. Michelle out of Columbia, South Carolina said very informative. Thank you. Patricia says truth. We appreciate you, Patricia out of Atlanta. Dr. Z said, love this conversation. Always an advocate, be an advocate for yourself. No question is a dumb question. You
No.
deserve a provider that wants to empower you by educating you as well. Don't be nervous to hold your physician accountable to ensuring you understand thoroughly. That is a word and some, isn't it, Sadika?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And that's true. We always have to, don't be afraid. You're your superwoman. You're your superpower. So
Yes.
use it.
Yes, that is so true. And she's absolutely right. You don't be nervous and push through. And again, I think so many times I'll say this as someone who knew and knows lots of providers. We appreciate the profession. It is a very highly trained one, but I don't want to downplay it like a hairstylist, but if it doesn't fit, you've got to be comfortable enough to go somewhere else. If you're not being heard, if you're not being seen, you've got to be able to say, this isn't a good fit, and try another one. You've got to. We've had therapists come on this show, Sadika, who have said that. They're like, if it's not a fit, do not sit somewhere 5 and 6 years when you're asking someone to get screenings or ask someone to follow up, and that's not happening, right?
Oh,
You've got to be able to speak up for yourself. And like she's saying, hold doctors accountable. But also, if this is not a fit, I need to go where there's a fit and somebody is listening to me and my concerns. Tambria out of Atlanta Metro says, if you do not know your family history, sit down with your elders and learn from them. Such a great point, because I know Renee out of Atlanta said you got to know your history, but Tim is right. You only know it by sitting and talking to them, because how are you going to know what great grandmother who died in 1926 died of if you've never really asked your mom or the one grandmother that's left? How will you know?
Yeah. So true. And often I think about my great grandparents. I was blessed to know them, and I think about the questions that I wish I would have asked. But oftentimes you're not thinking about that until now. So yeah. So and even if we created a log and of questions that you
Yes.
would want,
Yes.
and just
Yeah.
try to weave them. You don't want to be like it's an interrogation or a serious interview,
Yeah.
but just kind of weave those questions into conversations.
Yeah.
Even sometimes when you're watching TV or there's a movie, something might happen that sparks, oh, this is a
Yes.
good time to ask this particular question.
Yes.
And this
So yeah.
is how you can find out. And even when we talk about, aging parents,
Yes.
sometimes you don't want to be intrusive and ask certain
Mhm.
questions, but then throughout the day or throughout the times that you're spending with them, there may be opportunities to ask the questions, to open up those conversations about what their wishes might be, how they may want things to
Yes.
be. What are some of the resources that they currently have that that's going to help them as they continue to age? Those are some of the things that we need to really start thinking about and putting into practice, and not only in consideration of our parents, but really ourselves as well.
Yes. That is such a great point, because of course we all want a life of longevity and quality, but we know at the split of a second anything can happen, and we want to be as prepared as possible. There are things obviously you're going to be devastated about, but to have that conversation now, what are people wishes? What are some resources available? And we don't want to expect the worst, but we do have to plan for a real life, because as people are aging, and Sadika, you said it at the top of the segment as we begin to close, more and more people are living past 75 years old, which on one note is amazing. But on the other note, we need an infrastructure and we need a healthcare system that can support those individuals, number one. And number two, most people did not plan to live long like that. And if they did, their idea of living long at 85 or 90, they would still be driving and they would still be going to the spa with their friends. And for so many people around the globe, obviously it comes with serious physical ailments and also some emotional and mental ailments. For the interest of time, we're going to have a part 2 to this soon, Sadika. But also we do want to mention really quickly dementia. Obviously that is more prevalent, that happens as people age. But really quick thoughts and tips on that as we head out of here.
Yeah, real quickly, a disclaimer, I'm not a physician, but I do know that dementia is kind of the broad term, and there's various forms of it. One of the forms that I'm really concerned with lately is vascular dementia, because in our community, so many people have high blood pressure and diabetes. And so we know that that interferes with the blood flow and blood flow to the brain. And this can, affect people having dementia and Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. And so, as well as stress and, nutrition and a host of things. So we really do need to, talk about it more in our community. We need to talk about it to our physicians. And then also, I don't want people to get too concerned where someone may just have a brain fog, or what they call a 50 memory loss, like I had a moment ago. But that doesn't mean that I have Alzheimer's. But if I'm starting to not pay bills, or if you come over and see me and my house is in total disarray, or I've been driving places and no one knows where I am, that's the time to start, getting worried. So,
that's right.
Right. So,
that's right. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Thank
but
you
it
for saying
is
that,
a conversation that we need to have more of these conversations in our community. And it is another reason to take care of ourselves and watch the diet and do the exercise and take the medication, because that's one form that we know that we can, help to alleviate.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So thank you for bringing that up, because you're right. We have to be compliant with what we are being told about the diseases we have, because it's not just physical. A lot of that can also affect your brain and the cells in your brain. And you're absolutely right. And stress. And there are things, a lot of people, let's be real, we've had therapists on this show, trauma that people went through in their childhood, they didn't predict, they didn't ask for, but that doesn't mean the coping skills got you through your 20s and 30s and 40s to drink heavily, or to perhaps mask it with drug use. But it doesn't mean it didn't come back in a vicious form with maybe some brain damage. Obviously, this is not true for everybody that has dementia, but we're talking about a segment, it may probably even a small segment, but that is real and we cannot ignore it. And thank you for being real talk for real people. Sometimes people get into the diagnosis mode. Every time somebody forget why they went into the room, it's not the first sign of dementia, correct?
Right.
So we also need to say that too, because there are people that, I've seen them, they're walking diagnoses, and I'm like, well, you've just diagnosed everybody, but yourself. But so we do want to keep a balance. And again, keep in mind that this conversation, as great as it was tonight, and we're going to have a part 2, it was for general information only. If you are suffering with dementia or any particular disease related to aging or any disease overall or condition, we do ask that you specifically speak with your provider for more information, okay? And we do have our experts and guests on the show, but we don't know what you're going through individually. Thank you, Renee. She said, thank you. Great information. Stacey said, this was a very informative segment. Thank you. Rochelle said, absolutely. Rochelle said, part 2 coming for sure. And Rochelle, thank you. Should be our last comment for tonight. I would love to help answer questions about your skin health and ingredients or anything anyone may have about your concerns with aging. Rochelle, that sounds like we're going to get you booked for the show to talk about healthy skin and get you glowing. And we'll talk about all sort of things. We'll talk about allergic reactions to chemicals. We'll talk about what helps your body and what hurts it, right? And I'll give a sneak peek, Rochelle. I want us to talk about spicy foods. Spicy food lover here, but I've had individual dermatologists tell me not always best for the skin. You may love the flavoring of it, but that's a whole nother conversation. But that has something to do with aging too. But we'll connect those dots later. Oh, Sadiqa, what a powerful conversation we went over, but I certainly think it was worth it. Before we head out of here, my friend, tell our viewers and listeners, if they're watching live or on replay, how they can contact you and get more information about your platform and aging gracefully with style and smart.
Well, I am on all social media platforms at Best Life Golden Years. I have a website, www.goldenyears.com, www.bestlifegoldenyears.com, I should say. And yes, please get in touch with me. I'll be more than happy to talk with you and support you and point you in the right direction for resources that you may need.
Yes, thank you, Sadiqa. Such a pleasure to have you on. What a great conversation. We're going to have you part 2 coming on because this went over, but we're all aging by God's grace. And we're going to talk about doing it because God wants us to do it gracefully. I know that, and we're going to do it that way. But Nasha Shineberry, our last comment, she says, spicy food. She's peeking over her eye with the emoji. Spicy food has other effects as well. But for many, it tastes so good. Sadiqa, thank you for joining us again, my friend. To everyone watching us live or on replay, we appreciate you. Thank you, Lakeisha. We appreciate you out of Atlanta saying great conversation. You know, you are deserving of information that's going to inspire you, motivate you, and educate you. I don't care whatever walk of life you're from, if you're in the nursing field, the medical field, if you're an educator, if you happen to be a hairstylist, if you happen to be a podcaster like myself, or whatever you're in public relations, you deserve to have conversations that matter, things that will maybe be applicable to you today or maybe 2 years from now. You just never know when real life will hit. And because you're real people, Let's Talk America podcast continues to offer real information. It's real talk for real people, and that's you. Stay with us. We're going to be back on with other conversations that matter because you matter. Sadiqa, thank you for joining us. And remember, everyone, tag a friend, a family member, and let them know that we talked about aging smart in 2024. And Sadiqa Gibson was a wonderful exclusive guest. Stay with us, everyone.
Good night.